teach homeowners ways to garden that minimize the amount of water, pesticides, and chemicals so that their gardening is more sustainable. And it doesn't always have to be Florida native plants. It can be really different types of plants as long as you don't overwater them, over-fertilize them, or use too many pesticides. How many of you are gardeners? None of you? Okay, a couple of people, all right. What I want to talk a little bit about tonight is what makes a native plant, why natives are important, and then give y'all some examples of native plants that are really good to use here in Central Florida, and especially in Hillsborough County. So we're going to talk about what is a native plant, how to use them, and then give you lots of good examples. So native plants are plants that were here when European settlers came. They were here. They didn't come from Southeast Asia or Africa or South America like a lot of the plants that you see in the big box stores. But they came here, or they came by non-human means. And lately, we've been seeing a lot of that, with the changes in weather. And you can hardly talk about gardening without talking about climate change. But a lot of these really strong hurricanes we've been having in the last 10 or 15 years have brought in seeds and different types of plants that are really not native to the to the Gulf Coast. They're really native to Central and South America, but they're brought in on wind or on the water, and they're taking root here. So now we've got things like that to deal with. There are different reasons to use natives because number one, it creates a sustainable garden. I travel a lot. I just got back Saturday night. I was in Africa for 2 weeks, and I came back, and my garden basically looked the same as it did when I left. Okay, I can't tell you it looks exactly, because a few weeds did come up through the pine straw, but for the most part, I just don't have to do that much maintenance. When you get your plants established and you put them in the right place, you just don't need to do that much to them. And the very important thing is it supports wildlife. A lot of the tropical plants that you see don't really support wildlife. What are some ways that a plant can support wildlife? What do y'all think? You? Okay, home. So habitat. That's very important. Okay. What else? Food, absolutely. Anything else? Okay, well, along those same lines is food, but nectar and pollen for our pollinators. But that's why it's really important to plant native plants, especially native trees, because that's what the birds like, that's what the insects like. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that later. Also, it creates a sense of place. I'm speaking to a young audience tonight, but a lot of times when I'm speaking to homeowners, I'm talking to people either my age, I'm 61, or even older, people who grew up in Hillsborough County, and they're astounded at the difference of how Tampa looks now than it did when they were growing up. So it's nice to have what we call a sense of place. Get some native plants in there, and it kind of calms you down. It reminds you of what things looked like when you were younger. Some reasons why people might not want natives, but people think they're slow growing. They're not slow growing. The thing is, the tropical plants that you can buy are fast growing. If you think about their native habitat, for example, a lot of the plants that you see at the big box stores, Home Depot and Lowe's, they're native to Central and South America. Well, if you think about the rainforest down there, you've got a limited amount of space, and it's shady, so they've got to grow fast to reach sunlight. So that's why a lot of the natives, of the non-natives, grow really fast. Some of the native plants are kind of wild, and you don't really prune them into like round balls and things like that. You let them go kind of wild. For example, there's a really nice plant that I really like called American Beautyberry, and I'm going to show you some good photos of that. But you don't prune that plant, because if you do, you take away the berries. It produces bright purple berries that birds like. So that's why it's one of my favorites. So, some people think, well, they like this manicured look, which is okay, but unless you're trying to support wildlife, then you've got to let them go kind of wild. Some are more expensive to buy, and that's because they're not in broad production. down in the Miami area, there are wholesale plant growers that have got greenhouses as big as a football field, literally that big. They've got rows and rows and rows of these tropical plants. The native plant growers don't have that. They may have a growing area that's the size of this room. So to stay in business, they've got to charge a little more for their plants. But it doesn't bother me to pay a little more because I know my natives are going to make it. Like tonight or last night, it got to be kind of cold. Maybe some people who had fragile, plants outside had to go out there and cover them with sheets. Well, I certainly don't do that because, my native plants can handle it just fine. Some are difficult to find. Do any of you ever attend the plant festivals here at USF at the Botanical Gardens? They're on the second weekend in April and October. And that's a fabulous place to buy native plants. In fact, the Native Plant Society has our booth there. And if you ever attend, and I really encourage you to, as you walk into the garden, we're the first booth on your left. And we're busy all day long. But check out those plant sales sometimes. As students, do y'all get in there for free or do you still have to pay? Do you know? Is it okay? Do any of you ever go over to the Botanical Garden? Because I've been volunteering over there for over 20 years, and it's amazing. I'll meet people that grew up in Tampa, and they're like, "Oh, really? USF has a Botanical Garden?" A lot of people just don't know about it, but it really is a nice thing to do. I know y'all's focus is the football team, but really the Botanical Garden is really nice. And you know what? That's good. That's really not your job to pay attention to trees. Your job is to study. But I guarantee you can start paying attention to that oak tree. It's full of activity. Birds, insects love to go to oak trees, and so do the birds. Ordinarily, birds, that's what they feed their babies. They get all the insects they can, and insects go to native plants more so than non-native. There are lots of different types of magnolias. The big Magnolia grandifolia, the old southern magnolia that can get 60 to 80 feet tall. There are a couple of those here on this campus. Lots of cabbage palms. There are also a lot of non-native palms, but there are a lot of cabbage palms. Cabbage palm is actually our state tree. And one thing that's really good about the cabbage palms is it's good habitat for bats. Maybe some of y'all have actually, maybe you've seen bats flying in and out of those palms at dusk. But bats eat a lot of mosquitoes, so they're a really good thing. They're not going to attack you. They don't care about y'all, but they really do eat a lot of mosquitoes.
How tall do the cabbage palms get?
It depends. That's a really good question. It depends on the condition of the soil, how much soil impaction. Now here on this campus, depending on where it's planted, it might be next to a sidewalk, next to the road, close to a building. But a cabbage palm ordinarily can get 40 to 50 feet tall. It'll take a long time to get that tall, but they will. And then these things right here, these are called boots. They're natural to the tree. There's no need to pull them off. A lot of people do because they think it looks sloppy. I like it because different ferns and things, when the spores get down in there, they'll grow, but there's no need to do that. But a cabbage palm is a really good tree, and in fact, all of these have high tolerance to hurricane winds. A lot of times the non-native plants don't have high tolerance to hurricane winds, but all of these do. Hollies, there are a lot of hollies out there. This is another great wildlife plant because the birds love these berries. They just love it. There's some non-native hollies, but this one, Dahoon, is a really good one. And there are a couple at the Botanical Garden. Fringe tree. Y'all probably never seen this one. You don't see this one that much at native nurseries, but you see it if you go on field trips or go on hikes. Do any of y'all like to go on hikes? If you follow the Suncoast Native Plant Society on Meetup, we have, I think it's the first Saturday of the month, we have a field trip at Lettuce Lake Park, and then we also have different field trips at different preserves throughout the Bay Area. But and they're always free. Well, except for I think it is $2 a vehicle to get into Lettuce Lake Park. But we take you out there, we tell you about some of the native plants that are out there. We'll help you identify different birds, and it's on a walk. Most of it is on a boardwalk. You don't have to worry about getting your feet wet or anything like that. But those are a lot of fun. But that's a place where you might see fringe trees on some of these nature walks. There are a lot of common names for it. Fringe tree, old man's beard. There used to be one in my neighborhood. I live in Seminole Heights, and there was one a couple of blocks over from me, but the new homeowners bought their house when it was not in bloom, and they just thought, well, look at these sticks, let's get rid of them, and so they took it out. I wish I'd known about it. I would have offered to try to dig it up. Yukon holly. Now this one has a very interesting scientific name, Ilex vomitorium. Humans should not eat these berries because it will make you throw up. And Native Americans used these berries. If they thought the children had eaten something poisonous, they would give the children a few berries to eat, and then the children, would throw up. But they also used them in ceremonies. They would just gorge themselves with all these berries, and then throw up a lot, and then get lightheaded, and then have different types of ceremonies. Fortunately, the tree does not have that result on birds. So birds can eat these berries, and they really like it a lot. And it comes in two varieties, this upright, and then this weeping one, which I kind of like. And this is what you see when someone has planted a weeping, when they should have planted upright, and so they prune the bottom, and it kind of looks like a funky mushroom. But still, it's a really good small tree. Winged elm, and it's called winged because you can see that's what the stems look like. That's a very good tree. A lot of insects like that, and so therefore a lot of birds are going to be attracted to that one. Because that's the thing, is getting birds into your landscape. Do any of you have bird feeders at your house? Do you have them hanging from branches, or do you have them, the bird feeders freestanding? Freestanding. I've tried that with the hanging from the branches, and I ended up feeding squirrels and rats. So I had to invest in some nice poles, and that's I just love it. I really do. I said I've been out of town and my garden looked fine. Well, the bird feeders were empty, so I had to replenish those. But I've just got of course mockingbirds, but I've got all kinds of woodpeckers and all kinds of things all over my garden, and because of having native trees and the bird feeders. Chickasaw plum. This is a nice one. And the plums are edible. Birds like them. They don't get real big like the plums you see in the grocery store. They're more like a large grape. But I've had Chickasaw plum jelly, and that was really good. These tiny little white flowers, and bees love them. My neighbors across the street are beekeepers, and I have had them, when I had a Chickasaw, I had to get rid of it. But I would be standing there, and at eye level, all these bees would be all over those flowers. And I'm a foot away from them, and they didn't bother me a bit. They weren't interested. They really wanted the nectar from those flowers. But that's another good example of how to get birds and wildlife into your landscape. Bald cypress. A lot of people think that cypress have to be in standing water. They don't. You can have one in your landscape. But as you can see from this photo, they've got a brand new one, but they're mulching all around it. Now, one thing to remember about a bald cypress is you're not going to be able to grow grass underneath it because you won't be able to mow. Why is that? What does the bald cypress produce? The what? Big roots. Well, they're called cypress knees. That's absolutely right. So when those knees start coming up, you try to mow under them, the knees aren't going to do too good, but I guarantee you your lawnmower is going to have a bad day. So, it is a good landscape tree. Oops. Okay, now some shrubs. Simpson stopper. Remember I said Ilex vomitoria induces vomiting? Simpson stopper's got the opposite of that. And it's just amazing all the different uses some of these plants had, some of the Native Americans had for some of these plants. In fact, I'm doing research right now on a talk on ethnobotany, and it's really interesting, some of the things that the Native Americans did with some of these native plants. But this is a really good one. I love this plant. The birds love those little berries, and the pollinators love those little white flowers. Walters viburnum. There are 3 photos here. Now this photo in the middle, that looks more like Disney World, doesn't it, or Epcot. That is not how you want to prune a Walters viburnum. I've got a Walters viburnum, and I don't prune it at all because it's full of birds all the time. The blue jays and mockingbirds get in there, and sometimes they'll fight and everything. Not fight, but argue. But it's I really like it, but you definitely don't want to do this. Because if you do this, if you're constantly pruning it, you're not going to get these beautiful little white flowers. They've got a fabulous fragrance, and again, it just brings in the wildlife. Saw palmetto, I know y'all seen this. This is all over the campus. A lot of people don't like this because it's just fabulous habitat for snakes. If you, all under here, sometimes you'll see in someone's yard where they've pruned a lot of this so that it's bare stems, and they've only got greenery at the top. But that is wonderful habitat for snakes. How many of you are okay with snakes, or you'd rather not see them? You don't. They eat rats. They eat roaches. Snakes are our friends. They really are. But this is a good plant, but you got to have a lot of space for it because they can get big. But there's plenty of this on this campus. This is one of my favorites, American Beautyberry, and it does produce berries that are that exact color. The birds love it. It's not fragrant. I've had jelly made from those berries, and frankly, it was tasteless. It's a matter of how much sugar you put in the jelly. But they are edible. But that is a fabulous plant for bringing in the birds. Low maintenance, no water, no pruning, no fertilizer, no nothing. You just let the birds enjoy it. Florida anise, and it smells like the spice anise, but it's not. You don't use it in cooking. It's just called Florida anise because that's what it smells like. But some people think it smells like dead fish. I don't know why. But in fact, I hesitate to even say that. But this is a nice plant, but very slow growing. I've had one for 6 years, and it's not even as tall as I am. This is my favorite native plant. I call it Grand Central Station. First plant I ever saw a hummingbird on. Hummingbirds and butterflies and bees love the flowers. Birds love the berries. I've seen snakes in mine. I've seen snake skins in mine. I've seen lizards hanging out on it. I mean, it's the wildlife plant. If we get a cold snap, the top part of it will look like it was burned, but it's fine. But, it'll all grow back. But I've got 6 of these. I mean, they're just fabulous. Oak leaf hydrangea. This is another one. This is our native hydrangea. There are other hydrangeas, but this is a great plant for shade. Again, it's good habitat for birds. Birds can get in there. Snakes get up underneath it, and also this plant is fun for flower arranging as well. Kumte. Maybe you've never heard the name Kumte, but I know you've seen this plant. It's all over this campus, and it's at the Botanical Garden. This is another one that the Native Americans used. This cone right here, they would pound it into a powder and bake bread with it. So, and it was called Seminole bread. But again, it's just a really neat plant. Wax myrtle. The birds love these berries. This was one of the most important plants to American settlers because they use the berries because they're waxy, and it helped them make candles. But the birds love these berries. This also makes a good hedge. I've got one on the property line. It's not that I don't like my neighbors. I just don't want them. I don't want to see them all the time. So it makes a kind of a good informal hedge. But again, the birds like it too. But that's the main reason I planted it, not because of my neighbor. But native azaleas. Now I mentioned azaleas earlier. The Formosa azaleas that are from China. Those are the more common ones. But these native azaleas, you absolutely have to go to a native nursery to get them. But look at them, aren't they beautiful? See, a lot of people don't care for this because that's the entire plant and that's all the bloom you get. We get spoiled like the Formosa azalea that we all grew up with. You know, those things are covered in blooms. That's just how they grow, and that's how this one grows. Okay, vines. Vines can be good and bad. Vines are good because they support a lot of pollinators, but you've got to make sure you've got room for them because vines can get scary out of control. But the passion flower, that's a great one. It's the larval plant for two of our more common butterflies, the gold fritillary and the zebra longwing. Do y'all know what I mean when I say larval food, larval plant? Anybody have any, you want to guess?
Yeah, before the bugs are like fully adult, it's okay for just the butterfly.
No, what were you, no, I think between y'all you got it.
Larval was like any insect at their premature stage, not
Okay.
just butterflies.
Okay, well, well, butterflies go through four stages of their life cycle, and it's the food for the caterpillar. So the zebra longwings and the gold frits are always going to lay their eggs on the passion flower vine. And then when the eggs turn into caterpillars, they will almost completely defoliate that plant, eat all of the leaves, but they won't kill it. And but then they can move, and in fact, a caterpillar can move up to 40 feet away from its original plant, and then go into the pupa stage, and then become a butterfly. But that's what we mean by larval food. And the butterflies themselves can get nectar and pollen from any plant that's in bloom that produces it. But each particular butterfly, the caterpillars have one species of larval food. And for the gold fritillary and the zebra longwing, which is our state butterfly, by the way, it's only the passion vine. This is one that I mentioned, the cross vine. This is a fabulous plant if you've got room for it. It really needs a fence, and I mean a long fence too. They've got it at the botanical garden. Of course, they've got a lot of fencing over there. But that is a really good plant, and hummingbirds love it. This one, hummingbirds also love this one. I've got this one, and I've seen hummingbirds on it, and it's just amazing. It's a slow grower. The first 6 months you don't see much action at all, but then it starts growing. But I really like this plant a lot. Now some ornamental grasses, muley grass. Do y'all ever see this one? I know it's on campus, and it blooms around this time of year. It's a fall bloomer, but it really looks good. In full sun, has tiny little seeds in it, which small birds who are seed eaters. Some birds don't eat insects; they're constantly eating seeds. But the little seed eaters, like the tufted titmouse and different birds like that, love this plant. You can either let it go wild, or if you want it to look a little more neat and compact, you can cut it back after it blooms. But it's entirely up to you. But either way, it's a really good bird animal support. Dwarf Fakahatchee grass, and this is important. Dwarf. It only gets about 3 feet tall. The regular Fakahatchee grass gets almost 7 feet tall. And if you've got a large landscape, or if you live on a farm, it's a great plant. But for landscaping, you really want to stick with this smaller one. But again, these native grasses provide safety and habitat for different types of animals. But they put out tiny little seeds, and a lot of these birds like to eat it. The birds and our native lizards and things like that. Sand cord grass, again, it's another one. These native plants, these native grasses look really good as far as providing different texture, but again, more importantly, they do support wildlife because of the tiny little seeds they produce. Y'all could probably go over to the botanical garden and find most of these plants that I've been talking about tonight. Okay, annuals. Annuals are plants that they produce flowers, one time of year, and then they die back, and then they reseed. They're not there all the time. That's why they go through their life cycle in 1 year, which is why they're called an annual. And it's interesting with a lot of these plants, like especially black-eyed Susan, it's not like the seeds just fall right there on the ground and the new plants are going to be right there. They'll show up anywhere because the wind will blow them around. But black-eyed Susan, that's a really good one. The bees love this plant. As I said, my neighbors across the street are beekeepers, and you know, her honeybees, they don't have to, you know, travel far. They literally just come across the street and hang out in my garden because I've got so many plants in bloom, which is good for me because, you know, I get a jar of honey every year. In fact, she's a graduate of the bee program at the USF Botanical Garden. Are any of y'all familiar with that, or do you know anybody who's taken it? It's a really good class. It's getting really good state attention. Beach sunflower. I remember when I first moved to Florida, and I was over at the with some friends at Clearwater Beach, and I saw this plant literally growing in sand, and I just couldn't believe it. But that's why they call it beach sunflower. If you've got the horrible, you know, soil, no nutritional content, nothing going on, beach sunflower is a good plant, but it's got to be in full sun. The one on the right is called blanket flower. It's called blanket flower because it's got these colors that look like blankets that the Native Americans use. I love this plant, and I'm so glad I'm hard-headed. The first time I bought one, it looked beautiful that year, and then it died and didn't come back. Then I tried it one more time. I thought we'd get the same thing. I thought, well, now everybody talks about how easy it is. So I did it the third time, and boom. Now I just never know where they're going to come up. They come up in cracks in the sidewalk and everywhere. But I love this plant. But more importantly, the butterflies and the bees love it. And the flower, some will be straight up, but some will be flat. And that's what I like, because it's like a little landing zone. You know, they can just land on it and, you know, drink the nectar and then leave. That's a good plant. Swamp sunflower, as the name suggests, it likes regular water. It also likes a little bit of support. They can get 7 to 8 feet tall. So it's nice to have this one either close to a house, close to a structure, or close to a fence, because a lot of people don't like the way, you know, if it gets 8 feet tall and then it, you know, starts to flop over, they think it looks messy. But, you know, just grow it close to the house or something like that, and an area where it's going to get a little bit of water, or, you know, if you're willing to water it every couple of days. But it doesn't have to be bogged, like, you know, mucky, you know, wet mud, but it doesn't like to be bone dry. But, that's a good one. The butterflies love that one. Now some perennials, and perennials don't die back. I'm going to pick it up a little bit to see if y'all have any questions at the end. Porterweed, I don't know why it's called porterweed, but this one, those little purple flowers, I mean, the bees and the butterflies love it. It can get a little bit of damage during a cold snap, but it's still, again, it brings in there. Rouge plant, this another one. The Native Americans crushed those berries and made paint, and they, you know, rouge, or they painted their baskets or things like that. But Florida Audubon has identified 24 species of birds that feed on these berries. And so that's a good one too. That's another one that'll pop up. You won't believe, you know, everywhere it pops up. You buy one, in 3 years you've got, you know, like 20. But that's okay, I like it. Sunshine mimosa, a really good alternative to turf grass. Don't like to encourage people to use turf grass. It's high maintenance. It's, you know, it's a waste of your money, your time. You know, use Florida native ground covers, but this is a good one. Full sun. Scorpion tail, another one. I love this plant. The bees are all over it. Little bees and wasps, all kind of native pollinators. But there's just now I've got some other examples. These are some just some photos I'll go through really quickly. My friend Nanette, she and I both live in Seminole Heights, and you know, we're both, you know, always in each other's gardens. These were taken from her garden. There's black-eyed Susan. That is actually our ornamental coffee plant. It's not real coffee, but it produces a berry that looks like regular coffee. But as you can see, the bees like it. That's at her house. That's her gaillardia. Mockingbirds, they guard the beauty berries. If you get too close, you'll get yelled at. Okay, that's the firebush, and then that's the zebra longwing on that. And then that's a plant called rosinweed. That's my favorite, and that's a gold fritillary on that. And then that's her Walter's viburnum, Big Walter, she calls him. And that is at the, let me see. I thought that might be out of the county extension, but I think it might be somewhere in Pinellas County, to tell you the truth. But all of those are natives. That's a meadow. And I guarantee you that thing, right now, there's probably 200 different species, different types of wildlife in there right now. Bees, insects, all kinds of things. There's some more. That's the butterfly, the caterpillar to the zebra longleaf. That's our a native hibiscus, and I've had these before, and I'm sure y'all notice what that foliage looks like. I've had some interesting conversations with TICO meter readers. Tell you, I tried to convince that guy that's a legal plant, and he didn't believe me. Again, that's a coneflower, and I'm not sure what kind of butterfly that is, to tell you the truth. But anyway, do y'all have any questions or comments about any of the plants that I talked about tonight? If you really want to bring in wildlife, you've got to have the natives. The tropical plants are great to have, for indoor plants, and whether you live in a house or you're in an apartment or a dorm, it's nice to have indoor plants. But outside, you really want to have the native plants to bring in the wildlife. So any questions or comments? Yes.
How do you actually plant a vine? Is it just like a regular plant, like a seed?
Real good question. Okay, again, I know some people came in a little bit late, but I mentioned right plant, right place. Make sure you know if that vine requires full sun, and you want to have some kind of support system. Now, I've got a couple of the native honeysuckles, and they're not next to a fence. They're actually right on either side of my front porch on a kind of a pergola. And so, when it starts getting long, I'll twist it around there. But when you plant a vine, you plant it, but you have to be really patient with it. You're not going to see a whole lot of growth with the vine itself, maybe for a year or two. Because what's going on is that vine is busy getting its root system established, and that's what you want. And when the root system is established and is happy, then it'll concentrate its energy into the plant itself. We have a joke about vines. It's called first it sleeps, then it creeps, then it leaps. So it's like all of a sudden you've had this vine for a couple of years, and then it's like, it's growing and it's going nuts. But you really have to be patient with vines and know that, because you might think, oh, it needs fertilizer. I better nuke it with fertilizer. No, you don't need to, but you just need to be patient with it. Good question, thank you. Yes.
How does it work, like working with your organization? So we're building a new building for our business where we're thinking about doing a rooftop garden. And then also for a homeowners association for a neighborhood to come in to try to promote doing native plants versus the grasses, like you said.
Yeah.
How would we work with your organization?
You mean to get a speaker to come talk to you?
Yeah, to get somebody either as a consultant or somebody. Do you hire out?
No, we don't. We as a master gardener, we're volunteers. We can't. I will have people say, well, who's a good arborist, or who should I use to prune my? Who's your favorite tool pruning guy, or something like that. We're not allowed to endorse different companies like that. But also, we can't just go to a home and do consulting and things like that, because if we did that, the phone would never stop ringing. And there are only about 120 of us, and what's the population of Hillsborough County? What we can do is public speaking, right, like this. We can come to an HOA meeting and talk to you about things like that, and see what your make some plant recommendations. But really that's all we can do. And also what we always tell people is, if you want any information on horticulture in Florida, Google whatever the topic is, vegetable gardening, then space, and then UF. And it'll take you to a University of Florida publication on vegetable gardening, roses, orchids, snakes, invasive toads, native plants, whatever. But that's really what you should do. But we do a lot of public speaking. That's what I'm doing right now. It's the Speakers Bureau. You know, I'm actually kind of backing out of it now because I've been in the program so long. I've been in since 2001, and if I keep doing all these talks, it won't encourage, you know, the younger, newer people to, you know, come up. So I kind of take a back seat. But you know, when I got this, you know, the phone call, you know, can you come speak to our organization at USF? I was intrigued, so I said, yeah, I'll come out there. So you know, but you know, it's just something different. But we love to help homeowners and you know, talk to you about, you know, different plants. But we are not allowed to just go to an area, whether it's an HOA's common area or private property, and do an on-site consultation.